phenomena, boiling is a natural phenomena, evaporation is a natural phenomena. Okay, so here for this example, first question, when we look at, when we feel heat at another end of the metallic rod, first question, what is the first question which will arise in our brain? That is, what happens within the rod when it is heated? When one metallic rod is heated at one end, what happens within the rod, inside the rod? Why heat is felt at another end of the metallic rod? That question will arise in our brain. So next question, okay students, just now only we discussed what happens within the rod when it is heated. For example students, this is metallic rod, here atoms are there inside the metal, here atoms. Here these are atoms are there. So whenever one end of the metal is heated, so here one end of the metallic rod is heated, one end of the rod is heated. When one end of the metallic rod is heated, what happens? First of all, the atoms which are close to the fire, they absorb heat. So these atoms, they vibrate like this they vibrate. Whenever they vibrate, so they transfer heat to another atoms which are close to these particular atoms. Okay students, so here when these atoms receive heat energy from the burner, from the flame, these atoms will vibrate like this, and that heat energy will be transferred to another atoms. These atoms also will vibrate, these atoms will vibrate. So like that heat energy will be transferred to the another end of the metallic rod. Already we discussed that for every atom, last orbit electrons will be there. That last orbit electrons will be bounded loosely. So whenever heat is supplied to the atoms, in this atom, the electrons which are revolving in the last orbit, they will gain energy, and that electrons also will transfer heat energy to the atoms. That electrons these electrons are called as free electrons, otherwise delocalized electrons. So here every atom will have last orbit. The electrons which are existing in the last orbit of every atom, for example here one atom is there, in this atom last orbit will be there, in the last orbit electrons are there. That electrons, whenever heat is supplied, that electrons will gain heat energy, and that heat energy, these the electrons which gain heat energy from the burner are called as free electrons, otherwise delocalized electrons. These free electrons, they transfer heat energy to another atoms. In these atoms also, electrons are there in the last orbit, that electrons will gain heat energy and they will transfer that heat energy to another atom. So like that, for every atom delocalized electrons, so nothing but free electrons will be there. With that free electrons also heat is transferred to the another end of the metallic rod. You see here one atom, for this atom here free electrons will be there. For this atom free electrons, free electrons. Free electrons with nothing but electrons which are existing inside in the last orbit of an atom is only called as free electron, otherwise a delocalized electron. You know, whenever heat is supplied to the metal rod, what happens? The electrons which are existing in the last orbit of the atom will gain heat energy and they will come out of the atom. They will come out of the orbit atom and they will vibrate. Whenever they are vibrating, that heat, they transfer heat energy to another electron, another atom. From that atom also electrons will come outside and they will vibrate, and from that atom also electrons will come outside like this, and these electrons will vibrate and these electrons will transfer heat energy to another atom. So like that heat energy will be transferred with these free electrons from one atom to another atom, one atom to another atom, like that. So here like this, heat is transferred. Okay, so here this is one end of the rod is heated. Here the atoms which are close to the flame, they will get heat energy and they will vibrate, and that heat energy is transferred to another atom also vibrates, and that heat energy is transferred to another atom also vibrates. So like that heat energy is transferred to the another end of the metal rod. Already I said you, for every atom last orbit will be there. In the last orbit electrons are there, that electrons gain heat energy and that electrons will come out of the atom. Okay, so these electrons are only called as free electrons or delocalized electrons. Whenever they come out of the atom, the electrons will gain heat energy from the flame, and these electrons will transfer heat energy to the another electrons. Where are the another electrons? Another electrons which are coming out of the atom from another atom. Okay, here many atoms are there. For every atom, many electrons will be there in the last orbit of the atom. That electrons are called as free electrons or delocalized electrons. Why electrons are free? Why? Because electrons which are existing in the last orbit of the atom, when they gain heat energy, they will become free. Why? Because they will come out of the atom. When they come out of the atom, so they will transfer heat energy to the another electrons, and another electrons will transfer heat energy to the another electrons of another atom. So like that total heat energy is transferred from one end of the metallic rod to the another end of the metallic rod. Okay, so here one thing. Atoms vibrate by gaining heat energy. Okay, so here electrons in the last orbit, electrons in the last orbit of every atom come out of the atom by gaining heat. Okay, so here these free electrons transfer heat these free electrons will transfer heat from one end of the metallic rod to the another end of the metallic rod. Okay, so this is what happens within the rod when it is heated. So this is the phenomenon which is happening inside the metallic rod. This process is only called as a conduction. Conduction means heat is transferred from one atom to another atom to another atom, like that. Okay, so here why heat is transferred in metallic rod? Why? Because atoms are tightly packed in the metal. Atoms are tightly packed in the metal. When the arrangement of the atoms are compared with the atoms in the liquid, in liquid atoms are loosely packed. In gaseous, they will have more gap in between the atoms of the gas. But in solids, in the metals, atoms are tightly packed. So that's why whenever one end of the metallic rod is heated, heat is transferred from one atom to another atom, so on, like that.